Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dominions 5 Strategy. Today we are going to talk about one of my favorite nations, which is Ulm, specifically Early Age Ulm. I decided to step out of the Late Age and step back all the way to the Early Age because Ulm is one of the relatively few nations that exists in name continuously through the Early, Middle, and Late Ages in all three. The full list, I think, is Ulm, Arcocephale, Tianxi, Mictlan, Caleb, Pangea, Agartha, Vanheim, and Xibalba. And I think that's it. All of the others, many of the other nations exist kind of, but those 9 are the ones that maintain their own name and to some extent national character through the ages as opposed to mutating very, very dramatically. Now, they still change. Early Age Ulm is different from Middle Age Ulm, is different from Late Age Ulm in very distinct and dramatic ways. But there are common threads that run through all three eras. Early Age Ulm is, to my thinking, it's not the strongest of the three Ulms. That would be Middle Age Ulm, probably by far. But it is the most fun, I think. I really, really enjoy Early Age Ulm. So Ulm is based off of Germany, is based off of Germanic and Northwestern European mythology and legend and history. And specifically, Ulm, to my thinking, is based off of the early Gothic and Vandal Germanic, quote-unquote, Germanic tribes, Roman and post-Roman Germany. Whereas Middle Age Ulm draws significant inspiration from like 14 to 1600s Germany, and then Late Age Ulm is basically the Brothers Grimm. But Early Age Ulm has some fascinating characteristics that make it a very, very interesting nation to play. So if you look at their magic, you first notice Ulm has a lot of different magic. Earth, nature, fire, air, water, some death, and superior magic item forging. They are not kidding about this. We'll come back to it. Their priests are weak. They have standard forts, which is pretty good for the early age. In terms of commanders, the very first thing you notice is that, okay, you have the warrior scout, and the warrior scout, oddly enough, dual wields melee weapons. He's got a broadsword and an axe, and they both do really high damage, because he has strength 12, which is higher than normal for a human, and hit points 13. This is a common thread for all the Ulms to an extent, but especially Early Age Ulm. Early Age Ulmish troops are archetypical barbarians. They're aggressive, they're bad at defending themselves, they're good at attacking, and they have high strength and high hit points. However, they have low magic resistance. The basic Ulmish magic resistance is 8 instead of 10, which means magic resistance negate spells are extra effective against Ulmish troops. Ulmish troops are also a little faster than average, many of them. Combat speed 12 here. So the Ulmish Warrior Scout, he's stealthy, he has forest and mountain survival, he dual wields, he's ambidextrous, he also has cold resistance 5, which is also predominant among Ulmish troops, and snow move. Then you look at the Warrior Chief. So the Warrior Scout can be recruited in all forests, so you always have a scout from every forest province, which is a decent little buff. The Warrior Chief can also be recruited in all forests. The Warrior Chief is a good leader, 80 leadership, moderately expensive but not enormously so, cold resistant, snow move, stealthy, forest and mountain survival. This is, to my thinking, one of the best human commanders out of all nations, or most nations. The Rusian line of nations has similar commanders. Certainly Early Age Rus has similar commanders that are forest recruit and stealthy, and I believe also cold resistant and have survivals. But the warrior chieftains have, for humans, an extremely good stat line. And of course they're stealthy. This becomes important later, and we'll talk about this as we go through the nation. So those are their only 2 non-mages. The other 3 are all mages. The Warrior Smith. The Warrior Smith is one thing that really sets Ulm apart from most other nations. So he's not stealthy, he's not special, he is cold resistant and has snow move and forest and mountain survival. These things in combination, by the way, give Ulmish troops a ton of mobility. Like, a lot of mobility. oddly enough. They have reduced movement penalties in highlands and forests, and they have snow moves, so they're not hindered by snow-covered lands. So an Olmish nation can go cold 3 with almost no penalty, because these qualities are on almost everybody. The Warrior Smith, he starts only with 1 earth, which for 110 gold doesn't seem great. He's an okay researcher, not a great one. He gets 1 guaranteed random from the elemental paths, and then he has a 50% chance, instead of the normal 10% chance, to have another random from one of the elemental paths. So what this means is, half of your 110 gold mages are going to be 2-path mages, which isn't bad. And then half of them are going to be 3-path mages, which is extremely good for 110 gold. Now, of course, you are reliant on 4 separate randoms, but a significant fraction of your Warrior Smiths are going to have Earth 2. About 36% are going to have Earth 2. Any other combination, you're looking at 25% plus 12.5. I'm sorry, it's more than that. Yeah, a significant fraction of your other Smiths are going to have double randoms in one of these given paths. It's not a huge fraction. It's like 4% will have 2 fire, 2 air, 2 water, or 3 earth, but the chance exists. This is important because of the Warrior Smith's 2 other bonuses. For one, they have a resource bonus, so they let you produce more troops quicker. And for another, they have a forge bonus, so they spend 1 gem less when forging magical items. This is the same bonus that early age Machaca's Buddhas have. And what it means is, you can have one of these guys forge a Dwarven Hammer, or somebody forge a Dwarven Hammer, which requires Earth 3 and 15 gems. Except if they forge it, it's only 14 gems, of course. Then, you can take that hammer, and with that hammer, which subtracts another 2 gems, you can forge basic 5 gem items for 2 gems, 60% off. That's a very, very significant factor, because it means you can churn out basic low-level items from your Warrior Smiths for extremely cheap, and that goes for water, basic water items, basic earth items, basic fire items, and some basic air items, although many of the basic air items aren't really worth much. But this is mainly useful because it means you can churn out boosters very effectively. Most of your, or not most, a significant fraction of your Warrior Smiths will be able to pump out earth boots for 7 gems each, which is a significant savings and will boost your earth magic tremendously. A significant fraction of them will be able to turn out Fire in a Jar, which will let you cast Phoenix power on people who only have 1 point of fire magic. That's very useful, especially actually later in the game, when you can use it to boost up to cast Magma Eruption and things like that. So the Warrior Smiths are fantastic. You also have the Shamans. Shamans also start with 1 level of earth magic. They're not very good researchers, but they are stealthy, unlike the Warrior Smiths. Oh, also, Warrior Smiths, 40 leadership. So you can start recruiting these from every fort and never stop. You don't ever need to recruit warrior chiefs in forts because they can be recruited in forests. So every fort, Warrior Smiths all the time, pretty much. Which means that you get those randoms. They're cheap enough, you can just pump them out and get all the randoms you need. Shamans. Shamans are one of your only 2 sacred commanders. They are priest level 1. They have earth level 1. They get a random from fire, earth, death, and nature, and then a 50% of another random. So these guys give you some nature magic, nature death cross paths potentially, nature fire cross paths, fire earth cross paths, which the Smiths also give you. These guys are very, very handy, especially for your late game, because Shamans can break you into death. If you get a 2 death random Shaman, which is a low chance, but like I said, about 4%, then that Shaman can forge skull staffs and boost up and summon revenants and single-handedly break you into a death economy. Also, of course, anyone who gets 1 death random, which is like, once again, about 36-35%, can run around site searching for death to build you up some death income. Early game, and then late game, you can turn that into something else. Now, these can also be recruited in all forests. You do have to build a lab and a temple for them. So that takes a little more infrastructure, and you'll probably want to put a fort just to make them faster once you've made that investment. But still, they're pretty effective mages, and you will want to recruit a lot of them, especially because they're stealthy, so you can sneak around with them. Antlered Shamans are basically Shamans on PCP. They have all the same stats, except they start with 2 Earth and 2 Nature, and then have only a 10% chance of a random. So, guaranteed 2 Earth and 2 Nature cross paths. They are slow to recruit, and you can only recruit them in the capital, which is a bummer, but since these are your most powerful mages, kind of worth it. They can natively boost themselves up to cast basic Earth buffs. They can forge Thistle Maces and hold them to cast Howl, and they can cast Wooden Warriors. They can do all kinds of great things that you really, really want to have in support of your armies. Also, fun fact, Irminsul is a Pretender God chassis, although not always a fantastic one, but pretty decent. So those are your commanders. Of your commanders, only Warrior Smiths are not stealthy. Everything else is stealthy. And the Warrior Chief is, to my mind, kind of the most interesting because since Warrior Smiths can forge items at a significant discount when holding a hammer, and since Warrior Chiefs have such good stats for just basic human dudes, in some circumstances, it's actually worth it to turn Warrior Chiefs into what you might call mini-thugs, because you do not have to spend much equipping them. If you have a specific goal you want to achieve, it can be worth it to recruit like 3 or 4 Warrior Chiefs just from random forests that you have. They can be recruited anywhere. They need no infrastructure whatsoever. And hand them all like a shield and a basic magic weapon of some kind. The classic would probably be to give them like a black steel shield and a frost brand, which by itself would kick their defense skill up close to 20, their attack skill with their attack up to 14 or 15, and give them AoE damage. And then you can use 3 of these guys, or 4 of them, to take provinces away from people who have not put very heavy province defense in. If you're being attacked by giants, and you have like Melkarts or something rampaging around on top of you, recruit 6 or 7 or 8 Warrior Chiefs, hand each of them a great sword of sharpness that you forged for 2 gems. That pushes their attack up to 17, and it makes them do almost 30 armor-piercing damage per hit. And it also buffs their defense by an extra 2 points. So 6 of these guys with great swords of sharpness could probably chop down a Melkart, unless it was a late-game, full SC-geared Melkart. And even then, they do some damage. And it would cost you almost nothing. 12 gems total for 6 guys with a little bit of magic gear. More pertinently, excuse me, got a frog in my throat. More pertinently, the discount allows Warrior Smiths to forge, as I said, boosters and reinvigoration items. Girdles of Might, 2-gem Girdles of Might, give every mage that you put them on 3 points of reinvigoration. On top of that, a lot of your mages can cast Summon Earth Power to give themselves more reinvigoration. And you can forge Earth Boots cheaply to put on your mages so that more of them can summon Earth Power to get more reinvigoration and also cast Earth 3 spells. So you see how that cycles. As Ulm, your main limiter on your Warrior Smith will always be gems, rather than anything else. Gem income is your big bind. Then we go to look at the troops, and here's the interesting thing about the troops. Most of your troops dual wield, so you have really high attack density, and most of your troops are stealthy. Basic warriors are stealthy, they can be recruited in all forests. Basic axe warriors are stealthy, they can also be recruited in all forests. Archers are not stealthy, but can be recruited in all forests. Forest warriors are not stealthy, but have relatively high protection for the early era, and can be recruited in all forests. Mountain warriors can be recruited in all mountains, and dual wield fairly heavy-duty attacks. Warrior maidens are stealthy archers. They can't be recruited except at forts. Same with shield maidens. These two, not terribly important. This guy, also not terribly important. Decent stats, Very high damage, but you just don't really need him. The Steel Maidens, they got nerfed between Dominions 4 and Dominions 5 because the stats on short swords changed from defense 2 to attack 1 and defense 1. So their defense skill used to be 14. That said, they're still stealthy, high stat, dual wielding warrior maidens. They're good. They're very, very good. Attack 12, defense 12 is extremely solid, and 6 attacks per square. Now, their damage isn't anything to write home about. Against very heavy units, they won't be very effective, but against very heavy units, you have the Axe Warriors that hit for 20, or the Forest Warriors that hit for 20 even better, though not stealthy. And for general purpose raiding and fighting against things that don't have high protection, which is most things in the early era, Steel Maidens do a fantastic job. Your Sacreds, the Steel Warriors, they're a little bit of a disappointment, to be honest. They have decent stats. They have great sword attacks at a high level that do lots of damage, but they have less attack density than most of your troops because they only have 1 attack each, and they cost almost 30 gold, which doesn't seem like a lot until you compare it to everything else. You can get 2 Steel Maidens for that price. You can get 3 Axe Warriors for that price. Or almost 3 Forest Warriors. So the Steel Warriors just don't quite measure up, which is unfortunate because they're cool units. But overall, you're kind of better off leaving the Steel Warriors alone, especially because their recruitment point cost is also quite high compared to everybody else. The highest you get outside of them is, I think, 18, which is kind of human standard. And, yeah, I would, like, Axe Warriors recruitment points 9. They're nothing. The biggest limiter on them, on Warriors and Axe Warriors, is going to be resources. And as Ulm, in your forts, you will always have lots of resources because every Warrior Smith gives you a resource bonus. And elsewhere, you should still have lots of resources because you should be taking Production 3 on your scales. So, you have Death, Nature, and Earth income from Irminsul. You also have the Wheel of Pain. All it does is enable recruitment of Steel Warriors. If they were recruit anywhere, they'd be worth it. But since they recruit only in the capital, I would just ignore them. They're just not great. They don't stand out. You could bless them really heavily, but blessing them really heavily does not change the fact that they're basically just human dudes with weapons. And if you want human dudes with weapons, you have lots of those guys. And you have lots of those guys that are more effective than Steel Warriors. However, to my mind, the most important fact about your troop lineup is that a lot of it is stealthy, and all of it is cold resistant with Snow Move. Literally all of it. You don't have a single unit that doesn't have those 2 qualities. And Mountain and Forest Survival. So despite the fact that your troops, your commanders, only have map move 14, they can move 2 provinces across mountains and forests in the dead of winter, I believe. Yeah. Plains are 6. I'm not entirely certain what the, they may not be able to move 2 spaces across mountains. They can move 2 spaces across forests, no problem, if I recall correctly. So, it's a significant bonus. When it comes to Ulmish strategy, then, Ulm kind of plays like a knockoff Vanheim, because you have a lot of stealthy troops that do a lot of damage very quickly. They're not, Steel Maidens are literally weaker, cheaper, off-brand Vanheers. That's what they are. They're lesser in every stat and also lesser in price. Because they're not sacred, they're not nearly so efficient. They're not nearly so effective. But they're stealthy, dual-wielding, high-damage troops. And you have stealthy commanders. And stealthy mages. So, as Ulm, as early age Ulm, it's entirely possible to start a war by elfing your opponent, by which I mean taking like half their territory in one turn. But Ulm doesn't have to fight that way if they don't want to, because you also have access to these units, which are more resource intensive, and slightly better protected, and hit slightly more effectively. And you have access to non-sacred warrior smiths, who are earth mages. And you can spam these guys out, which you'll be doing anyway. And once you spammed them out and used their forge bonus to give yourself all kinds of boosters and low-level magic items to improve their effectiveness, you can march a stack backed up by a whole bunch of warrior smiths into battle and drop huge quantities of earth buffs on your troops that are already quite effective. And I mean, if you dump Strength of Giants and Legions of Steel on a big block of Steel Maidens, they are going to clean house. Protection 14, Strength 14. They'll be hitting for 20 damage with 6 attacks per square, and they'll have Protection 14, which is very, very solid. Ain't much gonna stop that. Regular old axe warriors will be hitting for 24, and their throwing axes will be doing 21 with 16 range. It can be very significant. Olmish troops also have this skirmisher ability, which means they can fight in sparse formations without suffering a morale penalty. That is very... It's not common that it's useful, let me put it that way. It's very circumstantial. Sometimes you will want to spread your troops out a little more to cover more area on the battlefield, but mostly you want to be in denser formations, just because in loose formations, you're not going to get the same kind of concentration of power for a few seconds after the line meets, which means you're probably going to lose the first round of fighting. You might be able to flank more effectively in skirmish formation, so you'll use it sometimes. You can definitely use it on archers. I would just be recruiting the standard archers if you're recruiting archers. You can definitely use it on them to reduce their vulnerability to return fire, but beyond that, not terribly useful. When it comes to pretender chassis, actually let's look at magic first. Spell-wise, Ulm does not have much by way of national spells. They have access to Sloth of Bears, which is a nature summon that's native to the Northern European population type. And it's not a bad spell. I mean, it summons bears. Bears are pretty cool. They're big, fat blobs of HP, basically. I think it's better than summoning ogres. Beyond that, though, Early Age Ulm doesn't really have much by way of national magic. Now, Early Age Ulm is an acid nation because some number of your warrior smiths will get the fire water cross path. Once again, about 4%, but you're going to spam a whole lot of those guys. And anyone who gets the fire water cross path can, in the late game, forge themselves a water bracelet, put it on, and start summoning green lions, which is, to my mind, the defining aspect of an acid nation. Later on in the game, you may potentially be able to cast Acid Storm by boosting up water, but that would be tricky. I wouldn't count on it. Mostly, it's green lions. Magic-wise, Ulm's biggest paths are definitely Earth and Nature, which means that your biggest early path is going to be Alteration. However, you want Enchantment, because Enchantment gives you, at level 3, Strength of Giants, and it also gives you Regeneration, and Haste, Foul Vapors, which you may eventually be able to cast, although you don't have the Nature Water cross path, so that would be tricky. It gives you Enliven Gargoyles, which Ulm can cast. It gives you the Ward spells. It gives you Watchers, which Ulm can eventually potentially cast. And it gives you the Hidden spells, which Ulm can eventually cast with their Shamans. Alteration, like I said, probably going to be your main path. You have all the useful low-level Earth spells. Then as you get up, you have Elemental Fortitude, which is a pretty decent defensive spell. You have Iron Warriors, Maws of the Earth, Mother Oak, and Wooden Warriors at level 5. Alteration level 5 is a huge research goal for Ulm. Construction is, of course, also going to be a very, very key path for Ulm, because Ulm is so good at forging items. Warrior Smiths are effectively much better than, say, Buddhas at forging items because they're cheaper. And you can have more of them more easily because they're not slow to recruit. So you can have tons of smiths sitting around researching and forging. And while Buddhas forge items as well as Master Smiths, but they're more useful and rarer than Master Smiths, so more often they have to be doing something else. When it comes to Ulm, you can almost always have a Master Smith free to forge an item for you. Going up construction, of course, you want to hit level 4 pretty quickly, ideally level 6 fairly early. You also want level 7 because Weapons of Sharpness is an enormous buff to your troops. Your troops get a lot of attacks that do a lot of damage. If you make all those attacks armor piercing, which is what Weapons of Sharpness does, oh baby. Oh baby. It is nasty disgusting. Also, Forge of the Ancients. Forge of the Ancients gives you more of a discount, and also gives all of your mages Master Smith, I believe. So it lets you buff up what items you're able to create. So Forge of the Ancients is pretty good for a nation that's already forging a lot of items. Also down enchantment, in that vein, is Earthblood Deep Well, which you would love to be able to cast. Love to be able to cast Earthblood Deep Well. Thaumaturgy, less important. Panic is a really good spell. So you probably do want to grab Thaumaturgy 3 at some point for Panic. Terror is also a decent spell, but it's one you can't really cast. Gnome Lore might be worth it if you can't bother to site search. But you have enough Earth Mages, you should be able to move around site searching. At level 5, you get Growing Fury, which is an interesting spell for Olm. Might be worth getting. Your Nature 3, your Shamans, a Nature 2 Shaman holding a Thistle Mace can cast Growing Fury. And it sends all of your troops on the battlefield berserk. Which can be really good for Olm, because they do a lot of damage so long as they don't run away. So sending them berserk and making it impossible for them to run away, in some circumstances, could definitely be worth it. It does mean sacrificing whatever mages are on the field, so there's that, but might be worth it. So, research-wise, Alteration, Construction are your big schools. Later on, once you've gotten some construction and built some boosters, you will definitely want to go down Evocation, and you'll want to go down Evocation at least to level 5, or level 6, more like. Level 6 gets you Magma Eruption, that's a big goal. Level 5 gets you Earthquake, which is pretty cool, as well as Falling Fires. Level 4 gets you Blade Wind, which is one of Olm's staple spells when comboed with the alteration spell Destruction at level 4, which destroys armor. Since your troops don't use a whole lot of armor, I mean, they use some, but not a huge amount, Destruction can be very, very useful for you because, you know, removing 10 protection from a warrior isn't all that much. Whereas removing, say, let's look at the early ages real quick. You know, removing 18 protection from a Burning One, or 17 protection from an Abyssian Infantry, that's kind of a big deal. Removing 21 protection from an Oni Shugo, or, well, removing about 18 protection from an Oni Shugo, also a big deal. Even for Rus, well, Rus is kind of similar in that they don't get much by way of protection on their troops. But you see what I'm saying. You know, removing 16 protection from an Unmarked, or removing 12 protection from a Fomorian Giant, that's kind of a big deal. So Olm has lots and lots of cool abilities. Later on in the game, your death random shamans become more and more important as you transition towards a death economy. Your eventual goal is to get boosted up to at least death, I think it's death 4. Let's take a look actually, just to confirm. Well, death 5 lets you cast Lichcraft, which are immortal. You also want... Yeah, your ultimate goal is to get boosted up to Death 5, where you can cast Wraith Lords and Liches, which gives you Immortal Death 3 Mages, and that is your ultimate goal. Mound Fiends. At level 3, you can get Mound Fiends, which are powerful Death Mages who can also reanimate skeletons by themselves. So just hitting Mound Fiends significantly increases your death economy. Eventually, if you don't take death on your Pretender, you will want to have somebody have a Death 2 Shaman that you empower once. That will make him Death 3. You hand him a Skull Staff, that makes him Death 4. Now he can forge a Skull Face, which will make him Death 5. And then he can call Wraith Lords. Unfortunately, since he has to hold the Skull Staff, he can't also hold a Hammer. Which of course means that you can't get a discount on the Skull Face. But, it'll be worth it. If you can build up the death gems to get to that point, you're probably doing alright. And once you start casting Wraith Lords and summoning Spectral Mages and Mound Fiends and Liches, you're in the money. You're in a pretty solid place. The two paths that Ulm can never really get into without very lucky independent mages are Astral and Blood. And that's fine, it doesn't really need Blood. Astral would be nice, because Astral has the spell Anti-Magic, which boosts magic resistance and can help shore up your national weakness to magic resistance, because the one spell that Ulm hates more than anything else in the game is Master and Slave. Your Antlered Shamans, your Shamans, and your Warrior Smiths have good magic resistance. Nothing else does, including your Warrior Chiefs, and your Warrior Scouts, and all of your troops. Literally every single unit outside of these three has magic resistance 8. So a magic resistance negates spell like Master and Slave can destroy an army like that. When it comes to pretenders, Ulm has choices. Lots and lots of choices. Excuse me. Frog still stuck in there. Probably the most competitive is the Thrice-Horned Boar. He has earth magic, he has nature magic, he's a berserking, trampling, expanding monster. You can take a Thrice-Horned Boar. Jeez, what is with me? You can take a Thrice-Horned Boar, kick him up to Earth 6, Nature 5, give him Hard Skin and Recuperation. He already has Recuperation, he doesn't need Recuperation. You can give him any bless you want, basically. The point is, with this bless, he can cast Earthblood Deepwell, and he can cast Mother Oak. And with those two spells, you're pretty solid. Now, this build does not give you many points, but you can tank cold with no penalty, basically. It hurts your income some, but not much. You can tank Misfortune, of course. You want magic, you really want production. You need production 3. So with the big pig here, I would basically go like, probably like that. Yeah, something like that. And then honestly, I would take like 3 points of reinvigoration and recuperation. Because this guy doesn't really need a bless to expand. When he berserks, he has 21 protection, which is pretty high, and he tramples and is size 6. So he's already very, very solid in combat. Once you've researched up a few points of alteration, he can cast Iron Skin on himself to get even beefier. And from then on, it's just, he just tramples things. Recuperation and reinvigoration will make your Shamans and Antlered Shamans very, very, very hardy in combat, and will also make them heal themselves outside of combat if they get afflictions. This bless is not very relevant for Steel Warriors, but you don't care about Steel Warriors, so whatever, man. And this gives you decent scales. The other option for Ulm, you can take another expander. You can take an Earth Serpent, which is a little cheaper. You could take a Nature Dragon, which is a little bit more expensive, but gives you higher nature and is a better expander, probably, overall. You could take an Immobile. You could take Irminsul. Irminsul is quite cheap for Ulm. You can't necessarily take Earth on him, but you can take a Nature 5 Irminsul with basically perfect scales. Yeah, you can do this. You have Misfortune, and you have Cold, but you don't care about Cold, and Misfortune isn't very effective. And you have Magic, you have extra income, you have a ton of extra resources, extra recruitment points, extra supplies, high growth, more research off your mages. If you take him Dormant, you don't even have to take Misfortune. Go down to 4, you have 41 points. You can take Luck 1. Now, he can't cast Earthblood Deepwell, which is a little bit of a bummer, but he can still cast Mother Oak. And Earthblood Deepwell you can theoretically get to. Well, only kind of. You can get a Warrior Smith up to Earth 4, and then you'd have to find a way around it. Well, you'd have to find a Crystal Mage or something. Or a Blood Mage and forge Bloodstones. But, I mean, if you wanted to, you could sacrifice a few scales here and give him earth as well. Let's cut that down. Yeah, you could do this. That doesn't hurt you much at all. That does not increase your income or resources by all that much. 6% on each. And taking Earth 6, of course, lets you take the Reinvigoration Bless back. And it gives you Earthblood Deepwell right out of the box. So this guy, I mean, basically exactly the same paths as the Big Pig. But this guy, Dormant, gives you a whole bunch more scales that the pig doesn't. Ulm does definitely live and die by scales, to a certain extent. You need Production 3, because a lot of your units have almost as much resource cost as gold, or slightly more. Mountain Warriors have slightly more. Forest Warriors have slightly more. You want those resources. Now, you can get resources from your Warrior Smiths, because each one gives you 5, so 3 Warrior Smiths lets you recruit basically another unit per turn. That said, you kind of want to have the resources available right from the start. You could go down to Production 2, probably, without hurting yourself, really, and pump it into Magic for more research. With Magic 3, your research will be quite efficient. You'll be paying 110 gold for 12 points of research, or you'll be paying 130 gold for 10 points of research, but it will be sacred, which means that its upkeep is only 52, compared to the Warrior Smith's upkeep of 88. So if you want efficient research, going Magic 3 and recruiting mostly Shamans is actually a pretty decent idea. The other thing is, your Air Random Smiths, any Smith that gets Air 1, eventually can forge quills, Air Quills for, 2 gems a turn, which is cheap. Very, very cheap. For the price that most other nations pay for 1 quill, you can forge 2 and still have a gem left over. So that's a very, very solid power. There are, of course, other options for Olmish Pretenders. You could take hilariously, the Ram's-Headed Serpent actually can work as an expander. I've tried it. It works. You have to give him hard skin, but if you give him hard skin and regeneration, Nature 7, he regenerates at 20%, which works out to north of 30 hit points per round, and most things just cannot kill him no matter what they do. Especially once you research up so he can cast Personal Regen, then he's regenerating at like 50-something hit points per round. It's sort of funny. If you want to maintain the stealth theme, you could take the Son of Fenrir, who gives you water nature cross paths. He doesn't give you earth, but he is stealthy and berserk. You could also take one of these two, the Eldest Dwarf or the Svartalf Master Smith. Both of them have Master Smith, so they forge at 1 higher than their paths actually are. The Eldest Dwarf is a lot cheaper. The Svartalf Master Smith is a Lenormand, so he can expand. So one of the strong Ulm strategies might be to take a Svartalf Master Smith, and then you don't need so much. He can take Death. If he takes Death 3, he can get to where he can forge both Death boosters. He can take Earth 4, and he can forge... he doesn't even need Earth 4, really. Well, he needs Earth 4... He needs Earth 5 plus Boots in order to cast Earthblood Deepwell. And then with his extra 20 points, he can take Nature 3, and that will enable him to forge both of the Nature boosters. The Thistle Mace and then the Tree Lord's Staff. Or you can make him just a wild, crazy rainbow, and eventually open up the ability to forge every item in the game. So, for example, I could go... Let me see. If I only need Nature 2, I should keep Death 3. I'll cut back on scales just a little bit. Let's cut Magic down to 1. Let's take Misfortune 3. And then I can take... let's go 3 air. I only need 1 water because I can boost water fairly effectively. I'll need 3 fire. That will also unlock Skulls of Fire, which are another fire booster. And then with my 45 points left, let's kick... Actually... Yeah, let's kick Earth up to 5. So now this guy could forge pretty much every item that Ulm is ever interested in. He doesn't get the discount for it, like the Ulmish Smiths do. But even so, you could do it a little bit cheaper with the Eldest Dwarf, I think, because He costs 120 points less, but this guy can also actually expand once you've given him his paths, because the Lenormand, of course, has the Poison Cloud and is generally very tough. So Ulm's got options. Ulm's got lots of options, all of which pretty much work. Pig is probably the standard. Dormant Irminsul is a good idea if you just want scale and want to rely on your troops. Lenormand is kind of a decent mid-ground and also opens up extra forging options that otherwise you might not have, like, for example, the ability to forge Staffs of Elemental Mastery. Forging a Stave of Elemental Mastery and handing it to a 3-path random warrior smith is a fantastic idea. Or handing it to an Antlered Shaman to boost his earth magic. Or giving it to a regular shaman in addition to a pair of earth boots, boosting somebody up enough to cast the real high-level earth spells. That can be a really great idea, especially because with Mass Warrior Smith randoms, Ulm can forge Flying Shoes eventually, Ulm can forge all the earth items, Ulm can use Shamans to forge all the basic nature items, and Antlered Shamans to forge the more advanced nature items. Ulm has a lot going for it, both forging-wise and unit-wise. So, I hope this has been a little bit helpful. We're going to go down, like I said, all the ages of Ulm. We're going to hit Middle Age next, and then Late Age, and talk about how they've changed and what they retain through the ages. Late Age Ulm is a completely different faction. There's very little left of the Early Age Ulm that I really enjoy. It's very different in feel, it's very different in how it plays, but it's still interesting. And I think it will be interesting to look at what those changes are and how they happen as time goes on. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.